Hello, everyone. Welcome to this FIDIC and CICA webinar. We will start in a few minutes, letting people in. Don't hesitate to write already your questions and from where you are in the chat.
Oh.
Hello, Daduna. Hello, all.
China, UK, Romania, Austria, Peru,
India, Indonesia, very diverse.
Brazil.
Should we start, Ondine?
Maybe we can wait one more minute. We have almost 140 participants. We can give them one last minute.
Okay, sure.
Switzerland, Nepal, Turkey. Hello, everyone.
Wow.
Hello from UK, Nepal, Abu Dhabi. Exciting.
Okay, maybe Fanny, you can give the go.
Thank you, Ondine. Good morning, good afternoon. So wherever you are joining us from today, welcome to the second episode of this FIDIC CICA webinar series. I am Fanny Dastugue, the Director General of CICA, which is the association representing contractors at the global level. It is, as always, a pleasure to collaborate with FIDIC and bring together construction professionals from all across the world. Today, we will discuss one of the industry's most challenging and fascinating areas, underground works. We will explore how the FIDIC Emerald Book can help project teams better manage uncertainty, allocate risk fairly, and deliver successful underground infrastructure projects. We are delighted to see that more than 500 participants have registered for today's session. We encourage you to contribute and post your questions in the chat. Our panelists will address as many as possible during the Q&A session. As we have a full program ahead of us today, I will hand over to Daduna, and I wish you all enjoy this time with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Fanny, for your kind introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all participants joining us from all around the world, as we can see from the chat. Welcome to the second joint webinar of the year, organized by FIDIC and CICA. We are truly delighted to have you with us today. A special thank you to CICA for collaboration and for making this event possible. We truly appreciate the opportunity to present the FIDIC Emerald Book to a wide audience. My name is Daduna Kokhreidze. I'm FIDIC's Chief Legal and Contracts Officer, and I will co-moderate this webinar today together with Fanny. Our topic today is very interesting. We will look at the FIDIC Emerald Book. The underground works, as many of you will know, are fundamentally different from other types of construction, as they are defined by a high level of uncertainty. In the underground projects, ground conditions can never be fully known, making risk allocation far more complex. These projects also involve constraints in access to site. Usually multiple stakeholders are involved as the owners of the land, and there is a need for highly specialized equipment. To address these specificities, FIDIC and ITA, International Tunneling Association, have joined forces to develop the FIDIC Emerald Book, which provides tailored risk-sharing mechanisms and tools designed for underground construction, supporting more balanced predictable, and successful project delivery. The contract introduces specific features to help the parties manage such projects. In addition, the quality of the tender documents and the tender stage itself has a strong influence on the quality of the contract and the success of the project. And at today's webinar, we will present and discuss the Emerald Book, its role in this type of projects, and we will also look at the tendering and how the features of the Emerald Book functions in practice and how to prepare successful projects. We will hear the perspectives of the contractors, the employers, consultants, and the lessons learned from real project examples. I'm extremely delighted that today we have an excellent panel of speakers joining us today. I would like to start introducing them to you, and we will have a panel discussion with a little bit of a presentation at the beginning. So, to introduce the speakers, I'm extremely delighted that on behalf of the ITA, we have Elena Chiriotti joining us today from France. Elena is a co-founder and managing director of Incas Partners. She's a member of the Executive Council of the International Tunneling Association and has participated to the review of the joint FIDIC ITA Emerald Book. As I mentioned, Elena is a co-founder of Incas Partners, a consulting company based in Paris, specialized in technical and contractual aspects related to projects, including underground works. She has more than 30 years experience in tunneling, initially as designer and in the last decade in the field of strategic consulting to public clients and contractors. Our next speaker is Hannes Ertl, who is an Austrian tunnel and underground engineering expert with more than 25 years of international experience, specializing in tunneling, contract management, and dispute avoidance. As managing director of Vista Perfecta Consulting and Mediation, he advises global clients and institutions on tunneling projects and FIDIC-based contracts. Importantly, Hannes Ertl is a key contributor to the FIDIC's Emerald Book and also a key contributor to the FIDIC's guide on the Emerald Book that was published subsequent to the FIDIC Emerald Book. Our next speaker is Andrea Costanzi, who is a legal and contract manager with strong international experience in the construction and energy sectors. He's a senior manager at Webuild, a member of the EIC Working Group on Contract Conditions, and a lecturer at Politecnico di Milano. He has recently been published in the International Construction Law Review. Welcome, Andrea, welcome, Hannes, and welcome, Elena. And I'd like to hand to Fanny to introduce the rest of our speakers.
Thank you, Daduna. I am pleased to introduce Luis Otavio Rosa. Luis is a civil engineer with MBA, FIDIC certified consulting engineer and trainer. Luis has more than 45 years of experience in infrastructure projects. He is an educator, expert, and dispute board member in Latin America, and also treasurer of the DRBF Region 4 for Latin America. Among other titles, Luis is partner and one of the founders of Taroba, a consulting company specialized in contracts, claims, and dispute management with activities in developing countries. Thank you, Luis, for being with us today. We also have Scott Churilla. Scott is a new member of FIDIC Contracts Committee. He is a vice president and the director of project delivery strategy with HDR, assisting public and private clients in the planning, procurement, and administration of collaborative delivery infrastructure projects. Scott served on the Design Build Institute of America's National Board of Directors for 8 years and is former chair of its Contract Documents Committee. Scott has worked on projects in the United States, Puerto Rico, Venezuela, Mexico, Panama, and Canada. Thank you, Scott. And our last speaker, but not least, of course, we have Stephane Giraud with us. Stephane Giraud is a FIDIC DAB member and construction expert with over 30 years of international experience in civil, hydraulic, and electromechanical works. Stephane spent 20 years on major construction sites as contractor, site supervisor, and consulting engineer, including assignments as the engineer under FIDIC contracts. His project experience covers hydropower dams, water treatment plants, and large infrastructure works in more than 25 countries across Africa and Asia under MDB and private financing. So as you can see, we have eminent speakers today, and we will start the panel discussion, and I'm pleased to hand over to Daduna for the first discussion.
Thank you so much, Elena. Thank you very much, Fanny. As we start the panel discussion, for all participants, as we go through the discussion, please pose your questions if you have any, and we will have a Q&A section at the end of the webinar, and we'll try to answer as many questions as possible. Elena, thank you very much for joining us. It is truly a pleasure to collaborate with ITA and to have you with us. It is very important publication for FIDIC. And I'd like to ask you, from the perspective of ITA, what are the reasons that pushed the ITA to join forces with FIDIC to develop the joint publication for the underground works? And what do you think are the benefits of that the use of the Emerald Book could bring to the industry?
Yeah, thank you, Daduna, for the introduction. And good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, everybody. Well, actually, the reasons why the International Tunneling Association co-developed the FIDIC Emerald Book is definitely to contribute reducing one of our industry greatest challenges, that is the financial and time overrun that is caused by the mismanagement of geotechnical uncertainties, especially during the excavation and support phases on the groundworks. And since ITA advocates for the use of the underground space, for us having forms of contract that are able to handle properly the effect of uncertainties due to underground conditions without filing claims as a solution, play definitely a key role in reassuring decision makers to go underground, but also to establish fair contracts. And since FIDIC developed internationally recognized forms of contract for ITA, this was a natural and perfect collaboration to disseminate contractual good practices for underground works. And the benefit is to establish effectively fair contracts that are based on an equitable and balanced approach for risk sharing, especially as regards geotechnical uncertainties, and based on flexible variation procedures that allow to adjust for both cost and time during construction. So these are main reasons.
Thank you so much, Elena. It's truly a great effort joining the expertise of the organizations. Let's see what are the features that the contracts have provided for such projects and how they are used on the market. And I'd like to ask Hannes Ertl, who, as I've mentioned, been a part of the task group of developing the Emerald Book. Now, Hannes, if you could give us a few minutes presentation, why was the development of an independent contract form for underground works necessary from your point of view? And what are the key features of the contract particularly suitable for the underground works? And where does the Emerald Book stand within the FIDIC Rainbow Suite? Hannes, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Daduna. For your first question, you have already given a couple of answers in your general introduction to this webinar. So can we have already the next slide? I would like to welcome everybody to this webinar. Why was there a dedicated contract for underground works required? None of the previously available FIDIC contract forms were specifically tailored, obviously, and suitable for underground works. So when you think of the underground constructions, and you have mentioned it, Daduna, geological, hydrogeological uncertainties, this is a major thing for our industry, and none of the existing contract forms was able to cope with that in a way that would be fair for the contractor and equally to the employer as well. Next to the hydrogeological and geological uncertainties, we have one very, very important thing is limited access to the working fronts. And this is a very important aspect when it comes for the time for completion of a project, because when you have more difficult ground conditions to be excavated, you have only one way to go there. On any other project, you can set up multiple phases of work fronts, but this is not possible usually in a tunnel project. So, and this where it comes in, where some of the key features that we think are very, very important. There is other things that are important as well, like third-party land owners above the ground. They will feel an effect of the construction, and they have to be protected for their rights. And one thing that I would like to touch on very briefly as well is when things go different than expected, it is turning out to be quite expensive to change things. So this is where you need a very flexible mechanism for, as mentioned before, time and costs, and this has been implemented with the Emerald Book. Next slide, please. So I would like to answer a third question now, because this goes in line. Here you see the previously existing red, yellow, and silver book, which I hope most of our viewers or people in the webinar understand the basic concept. So the red book, of course, we have the employer design the works and the contractor just to implement. The risk sharing is balanced, but with less exposure to the contractor. Obviously, yellow book, design and build, where the design comes through the detailed design comes through the contractor, and this is more of a structure we experience in our industry to be used around the world. And then the silver book, where it's all contractors' risks, more or less. This is unfortunately used in parts of the world as well, but even in the forward, it says you cannot use this for underground works. Next slide, please. So now I will show you where is the Emerald Book sitting. The Emerald Book is sitting exactly between red and yellow. Emerald Book is an offspring of the Yellow Book, so we used the existing Yellow Book and implemented some changes to it, implementing some Red Book philosophy for the excavation and mining works, whereas BOQ items are implemented to make a compensation for the excavation and mining works fair. Next, please. The key concepts, obviously most important for all FIDIC contracts, but here dedicated to the underground works, is the balanced risk allocation. So it must be fair for both sides when you have a contract. Adding, please. So with the Emerald Book, the employer takes the ground-related risk and the contractor takes the performance-related risk. And I will tell you with the next 2-3 items how this works out in the contractual model. So the geotechnical baseline report is an important feature that is now implemented as a contractual document, which the employer gives to all the tenderers, and then of course to the contractor, the expected ground conditions. And there it is very important that we have quantitative baselines that describe the ground well. We have taken out the experienced contractor when it comes to ground-related risk. None of the contractors in the world has radarized, as much as I'm aware of, and none of them can know more than the employer in the tender phase. So for this experienced contractor, clause is still existing, but it is taken out for the grant-related risks. The employer is supposed to make a so-called reference design, and from this, next please, the employer will provide for the tenderers POQ items, which is obviously for price, and the so-called schedule of baselines, which is a POQ item for time. So the contractor will bid prices and production rates for the activities that are identified by the employer for the excavation and mining. So excavation and lining will be remeasured, and all the rest should be treated as lump sums compared to with an emerald price. Next, please. As long as the conditions are described as in the GBR with these POQ items and the schedule of baseline prices, the time and money will be adjusted automatically throughout the excavation. So there is no need for claiming anything when there is deviations, for example, like in the percentage of a support class. But if it goes beyond what is in the GBR, yes, then you will face the similar procedure than usual, where it goes down close 20, like a claim procedure, to get compensation for time and cost for the contractor. Next, I think that should explain the very basics very fast, which was hard because we were working a couple of years on it and putting it in 6-7 minutes. I hope I could transfer the main ideas of the Emerald Book. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hannes. Definitely challenging to present the full Emerald Book in just a few minutes, but the key features are important to mention. Elena, would you like to add anything in respect of the risk management, as the risk management is used as a mean to manage uncertainty? How much is this approach, in your opinion, compatible with the principles of the Emerald Book?
Well, Daduna, I think risk management is not only completely compatible with the FIDIC Emerald Book, but is especially by the FIDIC Emerald Book. In fact, it aligns with the standard requirements for risk management through several aspects that are included in the book. The first of all is the GBR, the Geotechnical Baseline Report, that is the central contractual document that is used to define the anticipated subsurface conditions and the geotechnical risk sharing. Of course, to properly define a GBR, an approach to risk has to be employed since that is, and then also the balanced risk allocation mechanism that is foreseen by the Emerald Book definitely stands within the risk management principles that are applied since many years in underground works. So with these mechanisms, risks are assigned to the party that is best equipped to manage, to control, or to bear them, so that, as Hannes was saying, the ground-related risks outside the boundaries of the GBR are allocated to the employer, and the performance-related risks, such as the excavation rates that are contractualized, are allocated to the contractor. And finally, there is still a risk register within the Emerald Book that is required to keep all the parties focused on anticipating rather than reacting to the events on site. So I would say that definitely the Emerald Book is adopting and is implementing in an optimized way the risk management approach.
Thank you for mentioning those key features, very important for risk management indeed. And I hand to Fanny to continue discussion and hear from the contractor's perspective as well.
Thank you, Daduna. Indeed, we will have a second round of questions dedicated to a deeper understanding of the contractor and employer's perspectives. So my first questions will be to Andrea. From a contractor standpoint, what makes underground works fundamentally different from other construction projects? And how does the Emerald Book help make geotechnical risk more measurable and manageable for the contractors? I know it's always a key question to know how we are able to measure.
Yeah, thank you, Fanny. Welcome everybody. It's a really important question, and with my answer, I'm going to reconnect to what has been already anticipated in the introduction. So, the starting point, in my opinion, is that in underground works, the uncertainty is not an exception; it is the rule for contractors. So, from our perspective, in particular, the main risks are not fully visible at under stage where ground conditions are only partially known, and the actual behavior of the ground can affect almost every critical aspect of the work, as Hannes was mentioning. And this is what makes underground work different from many other construction projects. If you think about it, a change in ground condition is not just a technical variation. It may change the way the work is performed, quantity of support required, for example, or sequence of activities, time to complete, and also overall cost structure. And this is the reason why, from contractor perspective, a traditional approach based on a broad lump sum risk allocation may be problematic, I would say. If risk is not properly defined, the contractor is either forced to price excessive contingencies, or it may later face impacts that are difficult to recover, as mentioned before. So the key issue is not whether the contractor should avoid all the geotechnical risks. That would be unrealistic. The real issue is that the contractor should price and accept only the risk that has been clearly described, measured, and correctly allocated. And this is exactly where Emerald Book become really important through its mechanism, the mechanism already described in the introduction. And as you mentioned in your question, the Emerald makes the geotechnical risk more measurable, but also more manageable, moving the discussion from the purely subjective forceability test, a classic contract, toward a more objective contractual comparison between two elements. What contractor assumed and what was encountered. And this is done through, thanks to the integrated set of documents already described in the introduction: GBR, schedule of baseline, bill of quantity, and completion schedule. So to conclude this answer, the real value, which is the real value for the contractor? The real value is that the analysis of ground condition become, with the Emerald, more structured. Instead of asking whether an experienced contractor may have foreseen a condition, the parties can ask, what did the contractual baseline assume? What was actually encountered? And more importantly, what time or cost consequences follows under the contract?
Thank you, Andrea. That's very clear. And I would like to understand better what are the main risks that you are encountering that may undermine this baseline-driven approach, and what should contractors do to protect their entitlements?
Concerning the risk, but also the concern for contractor, in my opinion, the main concern is that the Emerald Book may look sometimes good in theory, but it can be undermined both in, let's say, for two aspects, in drafting and the execution of the contract. So what contractors should do? He should protect this baseline concept twice. First in the contract, then in the execution. When I talk about contract, I'm thinking about a negotiation. Here is where contractor must preserve the Emerald architecture as described, and making sure that any particular condition introduced do not dilute, do not alter this risk allocation. And in my experience, there are mainly four risks to watch for. First is the possible reintroduction, as Hannes was mentioning before, a possible reintroduction of the experienced contractor test on top of the GBR baseline. If the contractor in fact has to prove both that the condition was outside the GBR, but also that an experienced contractor could and not foreseen it, then we have a double threshold, which could be really problematic. Second risk I'm thinking of is the misuse of GDR, geotechnical data, or site data, because from contractor perspective, all the raw geotechnical data should not become, let's say, a hidden risk transfer mechanism. Contractors should price the contractual baseline, but not every possible interpretation of raw data. Third risk I have in mind is document priority, of course. All the elements described, GBR, schedule baseline, bill of quantity, and completion schedule must be all aligned in the hierarchy of the contract. The hierarchy mechanism cannot allow other documents to override the baseline mechanism. In this case, the entitlement for contractor will become really uncertain. And fourth risk is a possible lump sum drafting, lump sum approach for the ground-related work, ground-related risk. As already said, as we know, excavation and lining work are the work which are most exposed to geotechnical uncertainty. So they should always be adjusted through the Emerald mechanism, not to be absorbed within the lump sum approach. So once the contract is negotiated and signed, the focus for contractor shift on the execution, as I was mentioning. Here, contractor must protect the baseline through the records, because unfortunately, a good contract is not enough. You need, in any case, to prove the difference between baseline condition and encounter condition. And that, of course, requires timely notice, daily record, good measurement mechanism for quantities and ground classes, but also to demonstrate the changes method and program impact. This is strictly connected with the real-time dispute avoidance, which is also important to protect contractor position. And in this sense, the DAAB mechanism can help preserve the practical value of the Emerald model. So, Fanny, to conclude my question, the contractor approach in connection to the Emerald book could be summarized in 4 principles: to price the baseline, protect the architecture, prove any deviation, and resolve the geotechnical topics, geotechnical issue in real time. I think that by doing this, the contractor ensures that the risk is properly managed, but also that there is a solid contractual foundation from start to finish.
Thank you, Andrea, for sharing your observations and practical recommendations that you have very well summarized with your 4 points. I'm sure we will have more questions to you later on during the webinar. But now we'll turn to Stephane to understand the employer's point of view, because some employers prefer to tender under the traditional approach with a red book, design risks for the employer, using geotechnical studies prepared by the engineer. What is the contractual risk of that approach compared with an Emerald Book strategy? Thank you, Stephane.
Thank you, Fanny, and hello, everybody. So for me, the Red Book traditional approach is easy to understand because the employer keeps the design responsibility and the engineer should have or prepare the studies and the contractor executes. Many public employers are comfortable with this approach, this organization, because they know the mechanism. But for underground works, and especially I work on dam, on hydropower project, the main problem is not only the design responsibility. The real problem is the ground reaction, the water, the water table, the access, and excavation methods, and ultimately the production rates to reach the parameter of the contract. So if the geotechnical studies are only given as information, but with no link with the contract or with the price, then each party can interpret the same report or the same geotechnical report in a different way. So the contractor prices one assumptions, either during his bid or during his claim, and the employer has another assumption, and the dispute starts when the real ground is different from what had been originally foreseen. So this is why this Emerald Book is quite useful, because it says clearly, this is a baseline. This is what we think this should happen regarding underground works. Inside the baseline, which is a sort of threshold, the contractor has to manage his production and paid regularly on a bill of quantity with unit price, not new prices from any claim whatsoever. So 2 years ago, I was in a dam safety panel during the implementation of a project, a dam project, and I had a discussion with an Emerald Book to present it to an Indian client. And India is very keen to use a traditional approach with the Red Book. And they found the Emerald Book idea very good, honestly. But ultimately, due to some constraints, they were somehow afraid to move on this new model. And they preferred to stay with the Red Book approach with the design risk on the employer side. While I understand this position, I feel it is a pity because the Emerald Book does not make geotechnical and geological risks disappear, of course, but it gives the practical tool, contractual tool to, as Andrea said, describe it, price it, measure it, and avoid endless argumentation during disputes.
Okay, thank you, Stephane. So, but when an employer is developing a project, but has not yet secured or received the construction loan from a multilateral development bank, for instance, why should the Emerald Book and the GBR already be part of the contractual strategy and of the tender documentation?
Well, in my opinion, the contractual strategy must have this GBR approach. You have to know the ground before going in a huge project with underground works. It has to be clearly detailed before the financing is fully closed, but that costs money. And well, it shall be under the project preparation. For a dam project, for instance, the lender will look at all the technical risks very carefully: delay, cost overrun, geology, hydrology, and interfaces between civil works and electromechanical works. But if the employer waits too long before deciding on the contract model, then the tender may already be prepared in the wrong direction, meaning that if the risk is not contained and detailed in the GBR, so the time to prepare the GBR is pretty much before the contract signature, of course. And the GBR must be in the tender documents in a neutral way because the tenderers must price the same similar ground assumptions. Otherwise, one contractor would be very optimistic or commercially oriented. Another would be very conservative with a lot of huge margin inside each prices. And the employer is not comparing the same offers. For me, the GBR is not only a geotechnical document, it is a commercial contractual document and a tender document. Unfortunately, that costs money and the loan is not properly in place while the project is not launched and the contract is not signed. But the banks have to understand that it shall be done during that period. So even with a limited budget before financing, the employer should prepare a realistic GBR early. It costs something at the beginning, yes, but it avoids paying much more later in claims, delays, disputes, or very badly priced risks.
Yes, we fully agree with you. We are regularly pushing for the MDBs to finance better the studies and to have a better preparation of the projects. And I'm advertising for the next webinar, but it will be the topic of our third episode with FIDIC, the good preparation of the construction projects. So thank you for all your recommendations and observations too, Stephane. I will maybe ask Luis to complement. Luis, to you, is it possible to introduce the use of the Emerald Book after the tendering phase has begun in another procurement model, like, for instance, Yellow or Silver Book? Thank you, Luis.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the question. It's an interesting question. It's like changing the tires while we are on the road. But I propose that we change drivers is still running on the road. The introduction of the Emerald Book, as you mentioned, is indeed possible, but it must be accompanied by additional care to define the risk that the employer can and wants to assume and which will be attributed to the contractor, because the Emerald Book has a different approach to risk management. And it's clear it shares the risk. We have a known risk that belongs to the employer, the underground, the geotechnical conditions, but we have also the risk of productivity of the production and the progress of excavation that remains with the contractor. So it's possible. We did it last year in America, and it's possible, but you should take care of the conditions, the special conditions of the Emerald Book, but it's possible.
Thank you, Luis. So I think we will now dive into the main features of the GBR. So I will turn to Daduna, who's more expert than me on this topic. Daduna.
Thank you, Fanny, and everyone for interesting insights. And I'd like to continue with Luis. Indeed, the GBR is one of the key tools or features introduced in the Emerald Book. I also see that we have some questions from the audience related to GBR. What are the recommendations for preparing the GBR during the bidding process? If you can give your thoughts on that, Luis, please.
Yes, as I mentioned earlier, the development of the GBR needs to identify various risks and quantify them in the schedule of the baselines. That's the main issue. We should make the relationship between the GBR, the conditions of underground, the progress foreseen by the contractor with the schedule of baseline. As Hannes mentioned, we have a bill of quantity for time. That's the schedule of baseline. For me, it's more important than also the GBR is the schedule of baselines. And particular hindrance and interruptions in order to determine properly the time for completion. The use of the Emerald Book that share the risk between contractor and employer. The aim is to finish the job and we have the proper completion time. The quantification of the hindrance and the events and conditions of the soil is necessary to allow for adjustment during the execution of the excavation and lining works. Emerald Book, everyone should know, makes time adjustment, either increase or decreasing time for completion. And the parts are used only to extension of time. If we found a better condition of the soil, we reduce the time for completion and keeping everyone happy or within the boundaries of the risk that they assume. So Emerald Book is time adjustment, not only extension of time. We can reduce the time for completion.
Indeed, Luis, thank you. And Elena, now what are the main mistakes to avoid when preparing GBR? And is the GBR adding cost to a project? And I also would like to pick up one question from the chat, and one of you could address it. The question is, how can we define GBR as good quality or bad quality? Is there any guidance with respect to the minimum requirement that a good GBR should capture? Elena, to you, and we cannot hear you.
I have to put my micro on.
Perfect, thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfectly.
Yeah. So speaking about mistakes when preparing the GBR, first of all, one of the mistakes goes really beyond the preparation phase of the GBR, is before starting the preparation of the GBR, and it's related to insufficient investigation or poor reference design. So having a perfect or almost perfect a contractual tool as the Emerald Book, and hoping it can solve all the issues of a project without investing in proper site investigation, in proper ground investigation, in understanding the behavior of the ground, in properly developing a reference design that defines the solutions, define the possible methods, and understand what are the uncertainties. Well, without this step, the Emerald Book itself, it will not be sufficient. So it's really an invitation to employers not to interpret the Emerald Book now having a design and build FIDIC framework that deals with underground works like a shortcut to just try to push everything on the contractor side. So no, still a good form of contract applies and obtains these results for a project if the investigation and the reference design are done properly. Then the second point is definitely in preparing the GBR, we should avoid everything is ambiguous statement, conflicting terms. The baselines have to be measurable, quantifiable. So we have to avoid the general definitions like, I don't know, high permeability or rock hardness are higher than expected. This is difficult to manage, does mean nothing, and we see a lot of it in project in which there is a risk register without an Emerald Book, and the risk register is compiled by we don't know whom. But definitely we know by experience a lot of definitions that are sometimes not really quantifiable and applicable. So the effort of the GBR is to be measurable and quantifiable. And also the GBR, in the GBR, I think Andrea was mentioning it before, we should not be tempted to throw all the ground parameters and to just to make sure that everything is the possible is covered. We have to select those ground parameters that are significant, that are key parameters for the construction method that is envisaged. So there is a selection of, there is an interpretation that has to be founded on good investigation and a good design. The interpretation leads to identify the parameters that are most affecting the construction method, and those are the parameters on which we have to establish the limit, the baselines, the responsibilities. And so this also means that in the negotiation phase, when the contractor comes with his proposal for the construction method, there must be room for discussing the GBR. And then another mistake, definitely to build the baseline on a worst case scenarios or with very large intervals of parameters in the attempt to transfer all the risk to the contractor. In this case, the GBR will not work. So and this will lead the contractor to increase the financial offer as a buffer for themselves. So these are general mistakes that should be avoided. And there was the part of your question, Daduna, that was related to, is the GBR adding cost to a project? Well, GBR, in my personal interpretation, requires definitely a certain investment during the design phase, during the preparation of the tender document, and the negotiation of a contract. But if the investigations and the design are properly done, are properly dimensioned, it shouldn't really represent a significant increase of cost. Actually, is a different approach to use the same data to come out with a better solution. So use the available data in a different perspective. And of course, there is an investment, but is this really a huge investment compared to a classical risk register that is done, it costs to an employer and is not adding benefits to a project. So no, I'm not really sure that it really represents a huge additional cost. But definitely, if it is properly done, it serves to anticipate the ground condition and to properly share the risk and avoid a majority of undue claims and disputes. And then on the approach to define the GBR, the North America they have been well advanced in the use of the GBR. So there are definitely from the states recommendation on the preparation of the GBR. In the Emerald Book, there are some indications also. So there is definitely references to define what is how the GBR has to be approached. Then what is the minimum to be included? It depends again on the project. So don't do the mistake of cut and paste from a project to the other. This is not the spirit of the GBR.
Very
Daduna,
very helpful.
If I can just add, the GBR is a commercial document. It takes the GGR that we'll talk later, combined with the means and methods, and discuss the possibilities and the risk. GBR is a commercial document. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephane, could you add briefly your perspective? What is a reasonable minimum, or could be a reasonable minimum approach to preparing a useful GBR with a limited pre-financial budget, if that is the reality that the parties or the project is facing?
Yes. You hear me? I don't know if I click.
We can hear you.
Yeah, thank you. For me, a useful GBR does not need to be perfect. In underground works, nobody knows everything before excavation, but the GBR must be clear, realistic, and usable by the tenderers first. And this is first, my first reference is to for the users to refer directly, I'm not doing any publicity, but to the FIDIC Emerald Book Contract Guide, page 85, which gives practical guidance on the preparation on this GBR, because it's a strange creature and we have to read and follow the recommendation the authors put in this book. The point is not to write a long geological narrative. The point is to define what ground conditions the tenderers are actually asked to price. So first, the employer should collect a minimum of existing geological, geotechnical, and hydrological data and disclose them. It is better to show the uncertainty than to hide it. Hidden uncertainty usually comes to back later as a claim or disputes. Secondly, we must separate three things: the raw data, the GDR, geotechnical or geological data report, the engineer's study and interpretation, and the contractual baseline. The GBR is not just a geotechnical report, we said, it is a contractual reference for risk allocation. Well, I repeat, but as Hannes said, the Emerald Book can be understood as a yellow book plus GBR, meaning the performance-based parts of a project can remain lump sum in a design-build approach, while the underground parts affected by ground conditions can be priced and measured through a BOQ mechanism, closer to the Red Book logic, but driven by the GBR. So this is a strength of the model. The contractor keeps responsibility for design, build, performance, method, and delivery, but the ground-related and the ground risks is priced against the contractual baseline and adjusted through measurable quantities. With a limited budget, how the employer could make a good GBR? That's a good question. So it must not be an expensive structure and literature book, but it must find a small, competent GBR team able to do the job properly and efficiently. A geologist or geotechnical engineer, hydrogeologist sometimes, and one FIDIC Emerald Book specialist who understands how the GBR should be drafted and how GBR works contractually. in a way, it is a bit similar to a panel of experts going in the project, in the preparation beforehand. Well, the GBR at the end ultimately should include practical and measurable assumptions, ground classes, groundwater, excavation methods, support lining, advance rates, and impact on productions. The purpose is to connect geology with time and cost. And for hydropower and dam industry, I would also include hydrogeological assumption as well as some design criteria. Well, it has to be also mixed with employers' requirements, which is another important piece. So even with a limited pre-financial budget, the minimum approach is to disclose the data, appoint a lean but competent GBR team, define measurable baselines, link the BOQ to the GBR, and make the GBR a tender and contract document, not just a technical appendix.
Maybe, Stephane, sorry to interrupt, but maybe we can take the question from Jawad, because just to clarify, regarding document hierarchy in the Emerald Book, in the event of a contradiction between the geotechnical baseline report and the particular conditions, which document takes precedence? Is a GBR positioned above the particular conditions in the order of precedence?
In fact, if you take the Emerald Book, you go on the 1.5 subclause and you have the hierarchy of documents, whereby you will find the places, and the GBR is on place F and the particular is on place D. So you should not put any GBR data or GBR information in place D in the particular condition, to reply to Jawad.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Stephane. Scott, let's look at the contract risk register and a contract risk management plan. And what is your view? How valuable is the contract risk management register and the contract risk management plan to the procurement and administration of a project? Also, I'd like to hear from you, how important, in your opinion, is to use the quality-based selection for underground projects?
Two very big questions. Daduna, thank you very much, and greetings from Florida, USA. Really, it's more than valuable, right? The contract risk register and the contract risk management plan. More than valuable, it's contract requirement under the Emerald Book. Contractors required to prepare those documents and submit them. They become a living document, really, right? Used and reviewed on a periodic, regular basis, updated as elements of the project change. But I would even further note this. I think that risk register and a risk management plan or a contract administration plan are really, at this point in our industry, kind of a standard of care, right? And what we're seeing in North America is, certainly I'm advising my owner clients to start a risk register at the pre-planning, at the early planning stages of the project, because you're able, as we're identifying the risks, able to create the procurement documents and, importantly, an evaluation criteria that selects the team that's going to address the risks that any given project is facing. And I also tell my owner clients, look, the proposers, the contractors that are going to be proposing or tendering on your project, they're preparing one also. And at some point, post-award of the project, a risk register becomes, as in the Emerald Book, becomes a regular part of the project meetings, be that on a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, whatever that cadence is. The risk register is on the agenda, and we're going to go through it and we're going to update it. When I'm thinking of risk register as well, very quickly, consider a spreadsheet. On a vertical axis, we're going to list all of the risks that we can think of, and that risk is those risks are going to grow. Some are going to drop off, and some are going to be added. Could organize them in terms of like site acquisition, right of way, permitting related issues. Are there going to be risks in procurement? Certainly during execution of the project, during closeout and commissioning of the project. So those are the primary headings. But if we consider on a vertical axis, we'll list all of the risks that the project would have. Across the horizontal axis, Number one, what's the probability for each of the risks? What's the probability of it occurring? If it does occur, what will the impact be in terms of costs and in terms of schedule? Who is the party assigned to that risk, or is it shared? What's the current status of that risk, and what are the next steps? Now, that's a very basic outline of what a risk register would be, but that tool, as I said, I think it really is becoming at this point a standard of care in our industry. To the last point on quality-based selection, I'll utilize, or I hear most in North America, qualifications-based selection. The selection of a team, of a contractor or contractor team, based in its purest sense, purely on qualifications. No price consideration. Price negotiated after selection of that team. Let's look at it at the far extreme. Of course, we know we have low bid procurements where price is going to be the determining factor. Qualifications, experience may not be the best, because if we're driven by a cost selection, that the low number is going to win. Somewhere in the middle of those two extremes, I will submit, is the best value selection, which would have an evaluation criteria that would look at qualifications, look at experience and a plan, but also have a cost element. Up to the owner, based on either the legal or procurement regulations that it's dealing under, that how to weight those evaluation criteria in the best value situation. But for the works that we're talking about underground, the complexity of the issues that we've heard about today already during our seminar, I would submit that a quality-based or qualification-based selection is so important, because we need to have teams that are qualified and experienced to do this work.
But we will continue with you, as we do want to hear some of your experiences, I know, in North America, and I invite Fanny to dive into the next topic.
Thank you, Daduna. We will now question the positioning and adoption of the Emerald Book. So we will continue with you, Scott. Are you seeing the Emerald Book being used on projects that include significant work beyond underground works?
Absolutely. And I would say that where we're seeing it are projects that, in addition to an underground element, have other significant portions of scope that involve important geotechnical information. For instance, currently, right now, the Panama Canal Authority is looking at a project called the Rio Indio project. It's essentially the creation of an additional reservoir to feed the canal with supplementary water on an as-needed basis. So it will involve the construction of a reservoir, and there will be 3 dams, a main RCC dam and 3 saddle dams. Now, the interface of those dams, or the construction of those dams, though not underground, involves a significant amount of, as you can imagine, geotechnical expertise. And so therefore, the ability to generate either separate GBRs or a GBR that addresses both types of work, the dam work as well as the underground, is a perfect example, I think, of that. That project is currently in the early industry outreach and procurement phase. We expect before the end of the year to have a virtual reach out to industry for industry engagement. And then shortly thereafter, an in-country event for industry. I'll put it in the chat. More information on that project and a link to that project's website can be found at canal.com, Panama Canal Authority's official website. But I'll put that in the chat.
Thank you. You can all have a look at the chat. And maybe, Anes, you can complement, going in the same direction. Could you share your experience? Could the Emerald Book also be used as an asset for other types of projects than underground works?
Yes, thank you. I think Scott has said most of it. It is perfectly suited for any works that contain geotechnical unforeseen conditions, because a hydropower project with dams, slope support for roads, and even a high-rise building where you have difficulty defining the real conditions in the underground could as well be done by an Emerald Book. We have to keep in mind it is a yellow book with an add-on to make it applicable for underground or for geotechnical uncertainties. So yes, there is a lot of possible applications for the Emerald Book.
Thank you, Enes. And how about Luis for PPP projects? The Emerald Book in PPP projects.
Yes, of course. The FIDIC arrangement of contracts allow the use of special clause in the particular conditions that allow the Emerald Book to be adapted to specific responsibilities of the granting authority and a private concessionaire for complex structure. So in a public-private partnership, yes, we can add some special clauses, for example, consequence of exceptional events that will have special provisions that will assume it by the granting authority. So the Emerald Book, as any form of contract from FIDIC, allows to adapt, to adjust with the particular condition. We are having now PPP using Emerald Book in an underground works, in an underground construction. So it's really possible. It's being done.
Thank you, Luis. We are working a lot on PPPs, so it's good to know. And we can dive into the topic maybe deeper later. And Scott, looking at what's happening in North America, what's the main difference between industry standard contract form that you typically see being used in North America and the Emerald Book?
I have to say without question, two things: the GBR and the definition of unforeseeable, right? I mean, I think that, and consistent with FIDIC's devising contracts that seek to balance risk between contractor and employer, those two elements of the Emerald Book, particularly the risky, as we've talked about today, the risky work involving underground work and expensive and equipment intensive. I think those two elements. Many contract forms in the U.S. might contain a different site conditions clause, may have geotechnical information. Sometimes owners or employers will try to qualify that information as for information purposes only. Many of those contracts do not have the clear definition and the boundary of what that GBR is, and with respect to the definition of unforeseeable, right? That if it is in the GBR, it is foreseeable. If it's a condition that's not in the GBR, it is unforeseeable. It's pretty clear to me, and I think a lot of the contracts that I see in North America do not contain that. Also, forgot to mention one thing when I was describing the Rio Indio project for the Panama Canal Authority. I described the reservoir and the dams. Forgot to mention the important element of an underground tunnel, a 7-kilometer tunnel that will be connecting that. A 9-kilometer tunnel that will be connecting that reservoir to the current canal system. Hence the importance of that underground work.
Thank you, Scott. Elena, you have the global perspective and the global vision on tunneling works. Do you know how much is the industry familiar with the principles of the Emerald Book? Are there any geographical differences, and is training needed in particular in some geographies?
Well, speaking about the geography, first of all, I think the Emerald Book is really bridging a gap in the FIDIC-dominated regions, such as all the projects that are financed by the multilateral development banks that normally require to base their contract on a globally standardized and neutral allocation of risks. In fact, for example, the World Bank has adopted the Emerald Book as a part of its standard contractual framework for all the subsurface construction and tunneling projects that they are financing. In terms of familiarity with the Emerald Book concepts, well, there are regions of the world that are historically more familiar with concept as the geotechnical baseline report as in North America. The concepts of risk management, I think that nowadays they are all spread all around the world and are being applied in different forms and ways. In Europe, for example, the familiarity with the principle of the Emerald Book is growing steadily through also the contractor and engineers that are working on international projects where this type of contract is starting to be applied. Even if generally in each country tends to adopt their domestic procurement laws and their standard forms of contract. I can bring you the example of France. France is far from adopting the FIDIC Emerald Book as a form of contract because we have our domestic approaches, but through the French Association of Tunneling, AFTES, we have now at least 3 working groups that are now working on incorporating different principles of the Emerald Book into the local contractual practices, and in particular all the remeasurement and time and cost adjustment principles. And as regard training is definitely, you were speaking about training. Well, training is definitely needed. The Emerald Book requires practitioner to get acquainted with these peculiar principles. But I think in the last years, FIDIC and also ITA have done quite a lot in trying to spread the principle, trying to give trainings, trying to bring awareness to decision makers. I would add that not only training is needed, but now that we are starting to have projects that are implementing the book, also divulgate the positive feedback from the application of the Emerald Book will be of paramount importance. And on this aspect, I think that FIDIC and ITA could and should continue to collaborate.
Thank you, Elena, for the panorama, and it's interesting to underline the differences between the international practice and the local contractual practices, and for your comments on training too. Before we reopen the questions to the floor, I have a last one to Luis. What measures can employer, engineer, and contractor take when works begin?
Thank you, Fanny. To mention one key important character in the Emerald Book, the engineer. I'm working as an engineer in a real Emerald Book now. So when you ask what measures employer, engineer, and contractor can take, they need to become well-trained, as Elena mentioned, aware of understanding the particularities of the Emerald Book, aware of identifying risks, and prepared for careful and proactive contract management and collaborative actions. And I should stress also that the Dispute Avoidance and Adjudication Board, the DAB, should be in place since the beginning of the contract. It's mandatory as any FIDIC new contract in order to be able to exercise its prevention role and properly comprehend the myriad of issues in an underground work. So a DAB could not step in only when they have a dispute. They should be there since the first day of the contract to understand and to collaborate with all the parties, including the engineer that has a major role to identify the ground support and also the ground conditions to be able to adjust the the schedule of baselines and the time for completion. Thank you.
Thank you, Luis. I saw in the chat there are some questions and comments about the prevention of disputes. So maybe Daduna, you would like to start with the questions from the audience?
Thank you, Fanny, and thank you everyone for your excellent presentations and discussions. Let's try to address some of the questions. We have many questions. We will not have time to address all of them, but we'll do our best. And the first question is, what level of contemporaneous record is expected to demonstrate deviation from the GBR? Any of you would like to pick up the question? Maybe Stephane or Luis?
Yeah, you go.
Go ahead, Stephane. Go ahead, Stephane.
Well, contemporaneous data is always a debate. I mean, when you have detailed in the GBR the method of measurement, then it's automatic. I mean, it's always the same measurement. The problem is when you are not prepared to measure and then things are deviating at site. So the level of details should be the one you prepared to measure, I would say. Otherwise, it's just, well, room for uncertainty. Sorry, it's not a good answer, but...
Thank you, Stephane. Fanny, would you like to pick up the next question, or?
Yeah, I can go ahead with the question of Jim. One of the major innovations of the Emerald Book is the mandatory use of the GBR as a sole reference for allocating risk. In regional practice, how do you recommend managing disputes when the actual ground conditions do not clearly fit into any of the zones or parameters described in the GBR?
I can take it. The Emerald Book has, and Hannes can complement. We have two situations. If it's within the GBR, we go to time and price adjustment as clause 13.8. And if you find a different site condition, different geological condition, then we go to 4.12, then we go to engineer determination. So that's the major role of the engineer to agree to propose a new time, a new situation, and later on with a determination. So different geological condition, we go to 4.12, and if necessary, we go to a determination from the engineer.
I'll try to pick up the next question. Where reduced advance rates result from both ground conditions exceeding the GBR baseline and contractor inefficiency, does the Emerald Book envisage apportionment of the resulting time and cost consequences, or is entitlement determined by identifying the dominant cause? Do we have any delay?
I think I can take that.
Please, Hannes.
I think that is quite simple because it's two different things. You're either within or outside the GBR. When you're inside the GBR and the contractor is slower than expected, then it's the contractor's problem, and he will not get an extension of time, which we will understand when it comes to liquidated damages and to the time-related costs that he will not get paid for taking longer to complete the job. On the other side, if there is a situation outside the GBR, then of course, then it is a way to claim for the contractor. So you cannot have both in the same time, because for a situation that is not in the GBR, the contractor has not offered production rates. So
Thanks, Hannes, for your answer. Fanny,
Yeah.
you have any questions ready?
I have a question from Alvaro. Before the signing of the contract, is it possible to review and change the GBR parameters? Until when can you change the GBR parameters? Anyone?
I can take that one because we have thought about this very long during the preparation of the Emerald Book. That, first of all, depends on the legal environment that you are in. In Europe, no, you cannot change. This is standard and it is binding to everybody, to all contractors. Of course, in other legal situations where you can have negotiations about the contract and the documents of the contract, if the contractor and the employer agree that they will change the parameters, yes, of course, then that is possible if both sides agree on. So it depends where you are practically in the world. So yes and no.
I just would like to add that if there is an error in the GBR after signing the contract, the contractor has time to appoint this error as clause 1.9, and then this error will be corrected by the engineer after the signing of the contract.
Thank you. Stephane, you wanted to add something earlier?
No, same thing.
Okay.
Nothing
You're
to
in
add.
line.
And what about the GDR, Geological Data Report? Anyone can draw this? Yes,
Yes.
Stephane.
I would like to mention subclause 4.10, which is related to site data. And site data may contain the GDR, which is a sort of sample of test, analysis, report on the raw data. So GDR is just the ground as it is, with no interpretation. And you have to understand that this GDR is just common, technical language. It's nothing like contract or price or time or anything. This is a topic of the GBR to enhance the data of the GDR up to the level where you can manage the risk of all the data contained in the GDR. So GDR is part of the site data, while GBR is a new creature of the Emerald Book to manage the risk from the GDR.
You can find a better, complete explanation on page 14 of the guide of the Emerald Book, the relationship that GDR is part of the GBR.
Luis, thank you for raising that. And just
No,
to
I don't agree on that, but I think easiest is look at 1.5, where the GDR is mentioned in the lowest possible hierarchy. It is way below the GBR, and it is not part of the geotechnical baseline report.
Yes,
the GDR.
It's small l after K in 1.5. Yes.
I wanted to draw attention of our attendees to the guide as well, which was produced that provides a clause-by-clause guidance in respect of each clause of the Emerald Book that differs from the Yellow Book, and that is also available, which is very helpful because it also gives recommendations and sets out the fundamental principles. So that's helpful. I'll pick up one more question, Fanny, if you allow me. There is a question whether it's advisable that the engineer is participating in the preparation of the GBR or not. What is your viewpoint? I don't know if Stephane, Scott, you'd like to share your thoughts on that, or anyone? Hannes? Yes, Luis.
Yeah, I think that the engineer has nothing to do with the GBR, because the engineer has a role during the execution of the contract. He will represent the employer in 4 situations and will have an impartial position on determination. So the engineer, of course, the engineer will study the GBR after signing of the contract, but we don't have the engineer on the pre-contract phase, my opinion.
Stephane?
I think the opposite, because I think the engineer, when he's appointed by the employer to help the employer to build the project, to do the tender documentation and so on, then the engineer shall be, of course, drafting the GBR. And the fact is sometimes the employer keeps the same engineer for the work supervision, but sometimes not. So in fact, the engineer of the supervision is coming from the preparation or not. That's possible one way or the other. But what I want to raise is sometimes the engineer is not at site during the project preparation for the tender documents. And this is where there is a lack of technical advice from an engineer to the employer, and the employer is launching the tender with a very poor GBR or no GBR, for instance. So I prefer that to see that there is an engineer before, Luis.
So
I think
I agree that we have
between consultant and engineer. Engineer, for my understanding, with a capital E, comes during the execution of the project, and there must be a consultant to the employer before that.
Maybe a last question from Aneta. Are there already examples of successfully completed projects based on the FIDIC Emerald Book? So we can have inspiring case studies that can be available. Are you aware of any?
We are aware that we have ongoing project. The Emerald Book, it's a very new book, 2019, with revision 23. So we have some projects ongoing, but as my knowledge, not of them finished yet.
What we can add maybe is that actually the Emerald Book is transferring to an international level some of the concepts that were already included in the Swiss approach in the CICA. So actually there are examples that were satisfactory from that point of view of the remeasurement of time cost and the fairness of the contract in some national approaches that then have been used as an inspiration also for part of the innovative approaches that are included in the Emerald Book. So in that sense, there is a background of success.
Thank you, Elena.
Exactly, Elena. This is coming from Swiss, Austrian, German backgrounds, the principles. I'm aware of one project that might be completed now, which is a tunnel project of a highway in Czech Republic, which was done under the Emerald Book principles. So, but I'm not sure if it is completed as of now.
Maybe we have to have a new webinar in the next years. I think maybe, yeah. Do you want to have a final words from each speaker, maybe?
One small takeaway in less than a half minute. Your one takeaway, one key recommendation from all of you, and maybe we start from with the sequence. We started from Elena, very briefly.
Well, very briefly, I think that both ITA and FIDIC do not want the GBR to become a battleground. So let's invest in good investigations. Let's push the design to the required level of detail before launching any construction, and take the time to transform the rough data into a GBR that is properly constructed for the specific project.
Very helpful, Elena. Thank you. Hannes?
I would like to continue where Elena ended. GBR is extremely important, but as well the schedule of baselines and the POQ items. If they are well done, then the risk of required claims in the environment that we have been describing in the GBR is limited, and it will be very beneficial for the project.
Thank you, Hannes. Stephane, your perspective.
Well, from my perspective, I think the Emerald Book is the best book FIDIC has produced for geotechnical risk. And I think that people should read. It takes time. Read the Emerald Book, and especially read the contract guide also. And that's it.
Thank you, Stephane. Andrea, do you agree?
Yeah, I agree, but I want also to say that based on my experience, the FIDIC Emerald Book and GBR approach is reflecting the trend which is now important, which is collaboration among the parties. So avoid conflicting and agreeing on GBR and mechanisms, which is not which is not a claim, but it's a joint, let's say, analysis from parties to understand where the risk is and how it can be well balanced. This is the right direction, which is good, and Emerald is going in the direction, so it's good.
Thank you so much. And very briefly, Luis.
Yes, be collaborative and be prepared and understand and take the time needed to prepare a proper GBR and schedule of baselines before starting the work. That's my message.
Thank you so much, Luis. I'll just mention a few words, just say a few words to bring this webinar to a closure. I hand it to you, Fanny, for your final words as well. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, all the speakers, for your time, for your expertise, and for sharing your experiences. It's been very interesting to hear. Thank you, all the participants who have joined us. I hope that we will see you soon. Maybe online at our next FIDIC and CICA joint webinar, maybe in person in one of our conferences in Delhi in September or in London in December. And your feedback is extremely important. So please reach out, please give us your feedback. And don't forget to share with us any real project examples where you use the Emerald Book. Thank you, everyone, and a big thank you to CICA, Fanny, you and Andine and Yeva and everyone behind for the collaboration. Thank you, Fanny. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Daduna. I share all your words, so I won't repeat. Thank you to everybody. We will share with you the replay of this webinar, and we will send the invitations for the next one. Thank you, of course, to Yeva and Andine and all of you for attending this webinar. Thank you and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.